Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Happy Hump Day. For those of you who celebrate, happy Valentine's Day. For those of you who celebrate. Before we get in with our call to order, celebrating the President's Day, may we start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very busy agenda and a pretty special agenda today with several components that we want to have. So with that, Chief, shall we turn it over to you first?
Fine. Good morning, all. We have a couple of promotions that we want to make, and the first promotion, I am chief right now. You have to give me the badge first. Can I make it?
I think so.
I do have a promotion to make. Colonel Lord, come forward, please. Promoting former captain, now Colonel, Lieutenant Colonel Jerry Lord to Lieutenant Colonel. And Jerry's been with us for how long, Jerry?
Just under 21 years.
21 years now, and Jerry's has spent most of his career in tactical operations. We want to give him a break. I can remember Jerry back in 2024 when we were on the streets of Ferguson dealing with the protest. And Jerry on a lot of days was our savior out there because the protesters, for whatever reason, was attracted to him. And seriously, they were. I mean, they would talk to him before they would talk to anybody else. And he brought a lot of peace with what was going on in Ferguson at that time. So congratulations.
Thank you.
He's going to hand him up here. He didn't wear his vest, so be careful.
You want to do something?
Yes, sir.
All right, there you go.
Still chief right now, so another motion to make, and that's Deputy Chief Ludwig.
Thanks, sir.
This is well, oh, we gotta take a picture.
Well, sure.
So this is not our first round of working together. You know, Ryan worked for me when I was at the academy. He pretty much ran the academy when I was there. He was working for me. Now he's pretty much running the police academy. Appreciate the work he's done. So congratulations to you, Chris. You know what? His best either.
It's so exciting.
You know what? I forgot something. Jerry?
Yes.
Should we?
Well, yes, obviously my wife's here, my daughter, my department family is here. And I think my mom and dad are probably watching me. So my mom and dad. Just real quickly, I'd like to take a moment. I'd like to thank you for your support of me, both you and the deputy chief, and obviously all the members of the county police department. It's been a great run up to this point. I look forward to the future. I look forward to making this a better agency. I look forward to working with the board members as well. Couldn't have done anything. My success is attributed to all the people that I work with. Thank you very much.
I have my mother here, Carol, my sister Nikki. I think my daughter Rachel's watching remotely from San Diego. My dad and stepmother are watching from Florida, and I don't know who else is out there. Gary kind of stole all my thunder. So all I would do is echo what he said. I wouldn't be here without the support of everybody. So, thank you, Chief. Thank you, Board. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
And we may have done that in inverse order, but it was for obvious reasons. Obviously, we have our 10th chief here, and that's pretty significant. When you think of all the years that we have been a functioning organization to support this community and protect it. Those of you who can't see, we have several of our former chiefs in the back, and we understand how significant that is to go from one chief to another. So before we get too far, I will, if you don't mind, we ask that you don't draw blood, although everyone else has said, would you draw blood? Chief, on behalf of the board, on behalf of our community, it's just ceremonial to again tell you thank you very much for the leadership of this very fine organization, protect this incredible community. So thank you very much.
Said it once before and I'll say it again, it's an honor to be standing here. This position as chief of the St. Louis County Police Department. I've had a good run here for the past 42 years and I can only see it getting better. I got good people working for me. Got a very supportive board behind me, working with me, and I can see things happening for this department, but I can only do it without the help of these people here and you guys out there. Thanks again. Appreciate it. Family. Sorry. Anyway, you met my wife, Michelle. My oldest son, I just saw him step in. That's James. My baby son. That's Kenneth also. And then this is my grandson, Philip.
Gentlemen, we greatly appreciate your additional leadership in ways that we've only experienced. The family to help them get here. We are really grateful to you for all that you've done to help make them so successful. So they're on their own, but relatively insignificant. Deeply esteemed that you're here. Chief, thank you for participating. It's almost 70 years that we've been an organization. Chief, you are 10. That is not lost on anyone. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Now we'll go back and do the formal stuff. We got fun stuff. Well, we got to do a roll call and open it up, so we got to get going all that. So get back.
Unless you all want to stay for this exciting part of the meeting, you're out of here.
Thank you for allowing us to celebrate with you. Thank you all for celebrating with us. So, Amy, do you mind doing a roll call? We call ourselves in order.
Yes, Commissioner Ashworth,
Here.
Commissioner Banks,
Here.
Commissioner Hassler. Here. And Commissioner Schwer. Here.
Thank you all. That's all still official. Chief, now we will push it back to you for the normal course of events.
Okay, went to the agenda. First thing up is our budget report. Talked with Josh Hill yesterday about the basic 2021 budget. What's been spent of that, and what's left of that. So she gave me these figures of the budget for 2021, we have spent probably about 97.7% of it, to the tune of $153.5 million on our budget. We have encumbered another $1.4 million to encumbrances, materials, projects that we ordered, but we just haven't paid for them yet. And we will be giving back to the 101 general account $3.6 million. I will make it a point that next year we won't have that much to get back to. That's what they're going to get back, but what we did not spend. So we spent about 97.7% of our 2021 budget.
We deeply respect our fiscal approach to that, we certainly use $3 million of that to
Yes, we could.
progress in the future.
Yes, we could like that.
I like the direction of investing in ourselves.
That's where we are with the budget. We've just spent, she didn't give me the numbers for the January 2022 budget yet as to what we spent up to this point. It's too early to get those numbers, so probably next month we'll give you some kind of idea as to what we've done for January 2022. Joyce, are you on? Maybe not. But anyway, that's all I have for the budget. I'm going to jump out of agenda for a minute. You know, in our closed board meeting, we've had a lot of discussion about our sunshine process here in St. Louis County that we discussed. I mentioned to you the fact that we need to get Lieutenant Moulton some help down there. And we've done that up to this point. We've gotten it done since the last board meeting. He's slowly working her into what goes on down there, as far as dealing with sunshine requests. So what I'm going to do is, on a monthly basis at the board meeting, I'm going to give the board meeting some kind of update, or have Lieutenant Moulton give you an update as to what's happening with our sunshine request. And he's here this morning to do that. Lieutenant?
As the chief said, I'm going to come up and kind of give you an overview of what we have sitting downstairs and where we're at. So back in October, or actually in 2020, we worked with the administration next door to find some kind of a module or some kind of a management system for sunshine portals or what have you. And we found one that helps the entire county, everything that we were looking for. So it fits. So we went ahead and went with it and implemented about the second week in October 20. So to kind of give you a little bit of perspective of how much we actually do compared to the rest of the county, from the start, from October of 2020 till today, we're sitting at a total of 25,913 total requests sitting in the queue. And that's the whole county. So if you put in perspective, a police department reference to the 21 other departments in St. Louis County that have custodian of records with them, we have done 23,441 requests. The rest of the county has done 2,472. And then I broke that down to this year, where we have January 1st of this year through February 15th, yesterday. We had a total of requests of 2,065. I broke that down a little bit more to open and close requests. We still have 1,118 open requests, and we have closed 147 requests. Breaking that down, since the software kind of helps us do that, we broke it down a little bit further in a couple of categories. Pending, out of that open 1,118, we're sitting at 554 pending requests. When I say pending, they're paused for either waiting for payment requester, or we have questions and we're still communicating with them, so we pause it until we get our responses. Due soon, out of that 1,000, we have 16 that are due soon. Most of them are due today, that we will touch and at least touch base with them with the 3-day period. So we're in compliance with the sunshine law. And as of yesterday, we are only overdue 12 requests as we sit. So those will be completed today, and at least touch base and tell them where we're at, when we can get them the responses. So all the other ones are just still sitting open. We haven't touched them. We haven't got to them yet. So they're still moving to questions.
So you said 23,000.
441 is what we've done so far.
Lieutenant, do you have like the top 3 or 4 things that are requested through Sunshine?
Well, since we went to body cameras and car cameras, it's kind of the gamut now. Anytime there's an accident or any kind of incident that they're looking for, it's always body camera, in-car cameras, CAD systems, anything that's relative to it, they're getting a little more complex. So it's taken a lot more time to get everything together to be able to provide to them.
So we don't know what the top 5 requests are from some information you get for us.
We could, yes.
Next, when you come back in the subsequent month, next month, it's a little bit of an update on where the community's primarily interested.
Okay. Sure. Well,
Do you have I know you just said you see the whole gambit, but as far as the time it takes to respond, could you give us an idea of generally that one of these requests, I'm just making numbers up, it takes 2 hours to put it in the system, 1 hour to research and an hour to respond, or how does that work?
the way the next request portal, Sunshine Portal works, it's forward facing. So the people that request the stuff, they can actually go online and put the request into that system. As you know, we can still receive phone requests, faxes, emails, or in person. All of those, we actually type it into the next request system. So it's sort of a managerial port for us. The complexity, the complex ones, they can take days, weeks, possibly, depending on the severity of the case and if it's active and how quick people respond back to us. A lot of what we're seeing now is mainly insurance agencies. They do the clearinghouse and they push 40, 50 a night to us at 2 a.m. So those are a little bit easier. And with the assistance with the chief of getting some limited duty people with us, we're training them up to get those responses out as quick as we can. And I've changed some things downstairs where we're triaging, so we can set it up with media, attorneys, lawyers, courts, other law enforcement, prioritizing. So usually the people that are the insurance companies don't mind a little bit of lag. Well, it's reasonable, but everybody else wants their paperwork yesterday. So we try to triage it. So it could be an hour, hour and a half to weeks to get stuff back.
Similar vein. So those, when we do go overdue on something, sounds like staffing may have been part of that issue, but we understand what our issues are so we can ensure that we're not overdue.
Yes, yes, and that's why we set up a different triage with that system. So we
That's
can
to ensure that we're not overdue.
correct. Yes.
Number, I've got Thomas in. Yeah, the numbers are.
Yeah, I'm overwhelmed, but I can't say anything.
And we're still open to the public. So we're still forward facing. We're still doing security licenses. We're still doing CCWs, concealed carry permits and licensing. We still have people walking in for reports or background checks or fingerprints. Besides the phone calls, we get phone calls. We average probably about 76,000 phone calls a year. So a little bit of work.
Yes.
Something to do.
Lieutenant, I mentioned SOAR, where your position is with SOAR.
The SOAR unit, sex offenders registration unit, they have right now only one detective that's assigned to it. Requested another detective to be assigned because we're looking a little bit between 1795 and 1810 registrants that we have to keep track of throughout the county. So with one person down there, he's not able to leave the office really to be able to go out and look for the ones that haven't registered. So that's why I'm looking for another body to go that route.
Blanket search.
Um,
Where are we in finding that person? Good, take care real soon.
And we're working with the U.S. Marshal Service right now. We're trying to get our people task force a little bit so that they can assist us in locating the ones that aren't registered.
How are you about your balance between commission and professional staff?
It's always been what it's been at now, where I'm the commissioned officer downstairs. We have one detective in SOAR who's commissioned, and we have another one that is the coordinator for the private security. So I only have 3 positions down there that are commissioned. The rest are professional.
I interpreted your question a little differently, which is, do they all have to be commissioned, or can you have some professional staff that help?
No, I think we can have professional staff. Yeah. The hard part for me is when I leave to go on vacation, there's no one to respond to emails. I'm in. So when I leave for a week, 2 weeks, I've got 2,400 emails to go back through. So it takes a little bit of time.
Thank you. Thank you. That SOAR position, I do believe that needs to be a commissioned police officer down there helping with that, because they're going to have to go out and contact people out there in the street to deal with that. But there are other positions down there. As a matter of fact, the young lady that he's got down there now, well, she's commissioned, but she's on limited duty, so she's just recovering from some injury. But so she'll be down there for a while. But there are some of those other positions there in regards to the record room and Sunshine Law. We can get some professional people down there. Lieutenant Shillman, Teneo, and crime staff.
Sure. Members of the board, good morning. Great to see you all. So I think the first thing we'll talk about is just a quick update on the Teneo report. I believe in each of your packets there was the pie chart. Put together by Faith Kistler. As you can see, nothing was completed over the course of the last month, and there were no recommendations that were declined. We did start one recommendation that was not started. Obviously, that upped the in progress from 37 to 38. I just wanted to give you a quick overview of some of the things that we are continuing towards getting really close to the end of completion. One of those that comes from the Real-Time Crime Center. One of the recommendations from Teneo was to share real-time crime center information with the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. That's about 70% through, because the MOU is currently under review by the County Counselor's Office. So we're getting really close to completing that. For the PIO unit, one new recommendation that started and is now in progress is that the PIO office has been asked to create, the way that the recommendation reads, is create a brand image consistent throughout our department. The PIO office has recently reached out to several marketing companies to get that true brand image. So that's the one that has recently started. In addition, from the Public Information Office, one of the recommendations was to add additional PIO personnel. As I think most of you are aware, Sergeant Panis posted that a couple of weeks ago. I think that process has closed. And is it accurate to say that interviews will be held here in the next few weeks?
Interviews have been conducted. So.
There you go. So even closer to actually having that person added to the PIO office. It's worth that in next month, that looks like it will be completely done and completed. And then finally, for my unit, the Bureau of Research and Analysis, 2 general orders that they recommended, that Teneo recommended that we update. One was social media policy. The written portion of that is all but done. The county counselor has weighed in with their opinion. We've made those changes. Now it just sits in the next week or two, assuming it will go to the executive command staff to command staff and then be presented to you all. And the same goes for our canine policy. They asked us to revise our canine policy to meet the IAPC, the International Association of Police Chiefs standards. That one is done in the writing phase as well. I'm reviewing that as well as the deputy chief. It will go to the county counselor's office onto executive command staff. So we're getting really close with both of those policies being presented. Those are the updates for Teneo and things that have moved. Do you have any questions?
So which one moved from not started to in progress?
Yes, sir. That was the create the brand image consistent throughout the department from the PIO office. And as I stated, I know that Sergeant Panis and her crew have reached out to the marketing companies to get that forward.
Commissioner, if I could, Sergeant Panis, you stated to me that taking care of that particular issue with Teneo will cover some other things that they have listed. So it's not just going to be that. It'll take care of some other concerns that Teneo had listed for us.
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Thank
you. And here,
please do.
All right. You can pull up the crime statistics. All right. So the crime statistics for January 2022, as you can see, these are full January 1 through January 31. So if you have a
Should be a mouse there.
Perfect. All right. Notable events. We've started. Any way to move that generic post? Perfect. Thank you. I think if you noticed over the past 2 months, we began throwing this notable events slide on there. Obviously happy to report that now, again, these are everything that we're going to go over here in this presentation, obviously in the context of it's just 1 month. But our citizen complaints, internal investigations, use of force incidents, which is a separate presentation that Commissioner Ashworth, I know on behalf of all of you, asked me to go into, which we will when we're done here. Just so you know, over the past 3 years, so starting in 2019, the average number of use of force incidents throughout our department has been 22 per month. So here in January of 2022, having only 17 is below that number. If you would ask me what the reason is, I think if we continue to go through this, we've had less calls for service. And again, I'll get into all that minutia once we get into the context of actual use of force. And I think it will all make sense. Main thing of note here is the failure to yield. So our department just started tracking failures to yield. So that is a policeman attempts to stop a vehicle and that vehicle does not stop for whatever reason. All of these, so just so you know, we started tracking this on January the 20th. So this data, that number 124, only goes from January 20 to January 31. So virtually a 12-day span.
Wow.
And that's across the county. We had 124 failures to yield. What I'm going to start doing for you all is continuing to throw this. I'm going to make it a part of our command staff presentation as well. But I'm also going to get further into the weeds with that number. How many from the North County precinct failed to yield? How many from the South County precinct? And so I can tell you that a quick look at that 124, about 70 of those occurred in the North County and or Jennings precinct. Another 35 of those were in the Afton, Southwest, or the South County precinct. So I apologize for not having that. It's a new stat to us, but I've already spoken with the crime analysts, and we'll have that breakdown for you starting next month on a little bit further out. But as you can see, 124 times vehicles failed to yield over a 12-day span.
So it's only vehicles, it's not people on the car.
That's correct. Yeah. So it's a new nature code that that the department created. So our dispatchers have been doing a good job of tracking that. And obviously, we can pull that data almost instantly. I can tell you as of right now, the number in February, so this would have been 1 through 14, I believe, was down overall, in the context of it, we were at about 80. So slight percentage down in February, but again, these things happen every day. An average of about 10 and a half per day just in those 12 days.
And that's a direct connection, I guess, with the pursuits, because they know there's no not gonna be pursuit, so they don't stop.
There you go.
They got one pursuit and 124 now.
Funny how that works.
Yeah.
Lieutenant, while we don't have the data, is there a data comparison you can do to other police departments to see what their failure to do is? Is this something unique to St. Louis County? Is this something that's endemic across?
I can tell you it's not unique to our department. This is a pandemic everywhere. And that's just, even from my time in the precinct, spending in the second precinct, and obviously, as you know, the second precinct has many municipalities, so talking to commanders at those levels, they see the same exact thing. Now, the difference is you take like a St. Anne Police Department, just for example, their policy is their pursuit policy is a lot different than ours. So they're going to have less failures to yield because they're just going to be initiated as pursuits. I don't know again, we just started tracking this on January 20th. I think it's great that we did. Long time coming. I guess the answer is I don't know what other agencies out of 50 plus track this sort of thing right now.
Would be interesting.
And we can definitely.
It would be interesting to see if those departments that have a policy, a no pursuit policy similar to us, compared to those departments that have a policy that allows pursuit. And it's information only, right? Not that we need to do anything with it, but it would be interesting to see.
Yes, sir.
That's not something you have to turn around next week, just as you can.
So when you look at the 124 failure to, out of that number, is there a way to tell whether those folks were eventually caught or stopped?
So the majority of these times, no, because there's not going to be. So the way that this would work, so a policeman attempts to stop a vehicle for whatever that is. Maybe he just sees that has expired, the subject has expired tags. He attempts to stop the vehicle by using his lights and siren, and that vehicle immediately takes off. That does not meet our pursuit policy, obviously, so that officer immediately terminates. He just advises the dispatcher that he just had a vehicle fail to yield, gives whatever description that he could, whether that's the color, make, model of the vehicle. Plate would be great, but not all the time. Obviously, if we get the plate, the majority of times on people that are failing to yield, obviously are failing to yield and running for a certain purpose, so those plates don't match the description of the vehicle. So the answer to your question, long-winded, sorry, is no. Most of those folks would not be. Now, they could be at a later time because, again, as information's developed, so I know that we have had instances where our officers have recognized through previous calls the driver of a vehicle. So they know that it's Brian Shellman driving the vehicle. They still will not pursue it because it doesn't meet our criteria, but then they can at least give that information to the real-time crime center who can push that stuff out. And there's different ways to go about that. A police report will be prepared in that instance, but those are so few and far between. So the majority of these, no, there's no arrest.
This question for you, Lieutenant Colonel Cox. If you have this person named Sean, there, we know where to find him.
I'm not running very far.
Building off of Commissioner Hassler's question, can we go the other way? Do we have any way to determine how many of those 124 did something that was significant, right? Certainly driving without a registration is important, but it's not that they just robbed a bank and took off, or so they costed a person or whatever.
So I guess my question to you would be, what would we deem as significant? Because robbing a bank obviously would be our pursuit policy, and this would never be a failure to yield. It would be listed under the pursuit category. So we're talking about minor traffic violations, even if there might be some type of warrant that's attached to a plate, but if it doesn't meet the department's pursuit policy, then it's terminated and then goes up to that stat and not the pursuit stat. Absolutely.
Try to narrow down on.
Yes, sir.
What is the significance?
Let me, I will definitely look into that as far as when, again, we just started pulling the data. As we continue to pull the data and see, get with Sergeant Brass and see what other things we can prepare to more accurately track those people that fail to yield. what the reasons are.
I,
No, please.
okay, so when we rolled out this failure to yield tracking, how did we communicate to our officers what constitutes a failure to yield?
So the officers should understand exactly what a failure to yield is. Lieutenant Colonel Cox sent an email to the entire Division of Patrol. I think at the time, Lieutenant Colonel Lohr sent it to all of Special Operations. Those two divisions basically make probably 99.9% of our traffic stops. So every policeman inside of those divisions was given all of this information on how we are going to track them. The good thing for them is it didn't really change what they did on a day-to-day basis already. It just changed our tracking mechanism so we as a department know how many of these things are out there. So not necessarily from, does that make sense?
It does, and maybe my question, it does make a lot of sense. You've answered my question, and I think I asked the wrong question.
Okay.
So the question I meant to ask was, can you explain to us what triggers a failure to yield? Does it mean lights and sirens are on?
So that it means an officer is attempting to stop a vehicle. And at any time that vehicle continues to go, again, our officers, I believe, and as we can see just from internal investigation type of things, are very good at understanding what the pursuit policy is. That if it does not meet the criteria, they are to immediately put those lights off, turn that siren off, turn around in the opposite direction. So that's the way that the policy reads. So again, they all have to sign off on the general order. Again, it didn't change any part of the policy. It's just from tracking. Sir.
We'll pull back up. Thank you for allowing us to get into the detail. You put a new piece of candy in front of us. About what you're going to do with it. Pulling back up, I think we'd all say 1 month worth of data. Good start.
It is.
So we have to continue.
Yeah. So, and as you'll see in these next few slides, when we go into the crime data, same thing. 1 month, can't draw a ton of conclusions, but now again, I know I'm not trying to beat the dead horse here, but January 1st and January 31st. So obviously homicides are down. Our aggravated assaults is what really jumps off the page to me. I know the question is why. I've had those conversations as recently as yesterday, morning and afternoon, with crimes against persons. The problem without going through every one of these aggravated assaults is understanding that crimes against persons, our detectives do not handle each one of these. A lot of these are handled at a precinct level. So in order to pull data on all of these from 2021, for instance, on why there was 130, it's very hard to say why somebody is using a firearm or using a knife or attempting to cause, which is what an aggravated assault is, attempting to cause serious physical injury or death to another human. Those are really hard things to get into. I don't know if this is an outlier because I don't want to say, hey, bully for us. And then all of a sudden, turn around next month and February is through the roof. So I wish I had a better explanation and on exactly why those are down 46-ish% since last year. But we can keep an eye on it as we move forward.
Have a good start.
Yep. Property, same thing. Good trends. If you'll notice, motor vehicle theft is up. Everything else is down. I have my own theory on this, and I'll give it to you. Well, number one, so with property crimes, we obviously saw a massive rash over the past few months. It's been well documented. I know to the members of the board as well on these catalytic converter thefts, the vehicle break-ins, the car cloudings. Those things have kind of driven all of our numbers north. So the precinct captains, along with Colonel Cox and several others, have, as well as Colonel Lord, again, when he was in special operations, having these guys, whether it's our SRU, special response unit, whatever, having more, what's the word I'm looking for? They had plans to actually combat this. That's probably some of this because they put more people in the areas, more officers in those areas where it's been getting hit. But also, I believe that the one number of motor vehicle thefts is up because of the absolute cold weather that we've had. So I actually did a little data dive myself 2 days ago, January of 2021, we saw average low temperatures of 34 degrees, so above freezing. We never saw one day reach the teens. In January of 2022, we had 12 days that were below 15 degrees on the low and an average of 22 degrees. So the cold weather, obviously, and the reason I point you to motor vehicle thefts is listening to command staff, listening to the captains on the department, all of their motor vehicle thefts, or the majority of them during January, were from people warming up their vehicles. So I can't pinpoint that that's, again, 100%. I keep saying if it's 1 month, we'll keep looking and hoping that the trend stays there. And so this one, obviously, we want to be a little higher. But you look at what I would consider the main two, because they're always the highest numbers on here, the narcotic violations and the weapons seized or weapons law violations. I think a lot of this has to do, the majority of these numbers are derived from the excellent work that our drug detectives do, as you well know, whether that's on the Violent Crime Initiative or just their day-to-day jobs. Obviously, with Detective Valentine's death in December, they had curtailed a lot of that stuff through the first of December and through the first few weeks of January. Their numbers are off the charts at the beginning of February. I've seen those, so I know that those are coming up, but I think that that's a lot of the reason is as they started getting back into the swing of things, these numbers have started to come up. And Captain Law's here, and I'm not put on this, but you would agree that the numbers in February have been through.
We shut them down for about 2 months. We started getting going for January, 2 days a week, back into the routine, work 3 days a week, and as it gets warmer, we'll get them back to 4 days.
Calls for service. Move that a little. Just want to see what that. Again. As you can see, pretty much everywhere is down January. So from the moving average of the past 5 months, again, same thing as I've been stating. We knew that the calls for service were down. Probably, obviously, a lot of the reason that the crime is down, and it's pretty much across the board with every precinct. That's for directed calls for service. Here's the self-initiated. Good thing is almost every precinct that's self-initiated is making up for that lack of directed calls for service by making up for it with the self-initiated. As you can see, January 22 is on the average higher in almost every precinct than what the moving average has been. Yeah, it is. And then again, this slide, that sick cases, phone calls, burglar alarms, things of that nature are always going to lead the way. Same thing with self-initiated. Those extra patrols, which is obviously our big, you want guys to make traffic stops and arrest bad people, for lack of a better term. But at the same time, keeping our businesses and our neighborhoods safe is, to most of us, I think, should be first and foremost. The officers may do a great job of that.
Can you go back just one?
Of course.
Can you share with us the one that says?
Well, can you go back? Because I just keep it.
You don't have to go back to it.
There you go.
It's called a sick case. Can you inform us again what a sick case is?
So our department responds to anything that EMS would respond to. We are dispatched at the same exact time as they are, and we respond to each and every one of those. That could range from somebody in cardiac arrest to somebody with a nose bleed.
It's by far the largest.
Yeah, absolutely. And so TSRs, which are always a big topic. This is for January. Again, nothing that 1 month, nothing that I see that's extremely overwhelming. I would like to update you that the Bias-Free Policing Committee, which our department has, we meet quarterly. Lieutenant Colonel Cox is the chair of that committee. Captain Guy Means is a member of the committee, and I'm the secretary. We just met last Friday to discuss our fourth quarter numbers. So October, November, December from 21. There was nobody outside of the norm as far as TSR, what we consider per our policy red flags on racial profiling. And obviously, we continue to monitor that every month.
So is that measured as a percentage above and below the
It's a,
demographic of the precinct?
no, it's percentage of what that officer, so it's called a Z-score. If that is above 2 over what your peers make inside of your precinct.
So it's measured individual by individual.
That's correct. Yeah. And then obviously this is for the totality of the precinct, but I can get you all a printout too of individuals, but obviously that has identified.
Does the committee also look at the precinct as a whole?
Absolutely. Everything's taken into consideration. That's it for the crime stats. Sir, would you like me to roll on the use of force? Breakdown?
Any questions?
Yes, sir, please.
You don't mind my other presentation? Sorry, I didn't mean to stand up here for this long.
We're peppering you with questions.
I'm good. Thanks. All right, so as noted, Commissioner Ashworth and I had some discussions about use of force. So this is an analysis that I did really over the past month of 2019 through 21 numbers. There's a lot of numbers that I'm going to throw at you. There's a lot of context that I can only give verbally, obviously, that the numbers don't tell. So be patient with me, and at any time, please stop me if we have any questions about that, because I think I've looked at these things so much, I should have the answers to most of them.
If you do, when you get to the conclusion, you have to share with us kind of what's the summary? What is it that you want to make sure that we remember in addition to what each of us might focus
Yep.
on?
I've got that at almost the last slide. So, so the first 2 slides that I put in here is just an understanding of exactly, it's taken verbatim from our general order. It's an understanding of what our department considers a use of force. And as it says here, whenever an officer uses or attempts to use force under extraordinary circumstances, this is the most important part, that vary from the standard handcuffing process or detention technique. So anything outside of normal handcuffing procedures. If I go to make an arrest and a subject compliantly puts his hands behind his back and is placed into handcuffs, there's no use of force. The second that he does one of these and I grab his wrist, that constitutes a use of force per our department policy. So as we look through these, and you will see that the majority, the overwhelming majority, 80% over the last year, have been from those sorts of things. Having to grab a wrist, what we call physical restraint. We'll get into that here in a second. This is our resistance control guidelines. I throw that in there just to have an understanding of what our officers are able to do, what type or what level, I should say, of force they are able to use against an individual or a suspect, and what type of resistance that individual is offering. So as you can see, it starts at the top, just an oral refusal to comply. We cannot use force. We can only use commands of direction, telling them that they're basically under arrest, using our verbal direction. Moving down to the passive resistance, as I put in the parentheses, ignoring the officer's commands, but doesn't take any further action to resist. We are allowed then to go to soft empty hand control. That would be things like joint locks, pressure points, to try to gain compliance of an individual. As you move down to the third one, defensive resistance, now we've talked about a person who's physically resisting arrest. I'm trying to handcuff him. He's now physical, but he's not assaultive towards me. So I can use any level of the taser, pepper spray, hard empty hand control, or any level of pain compliance things, as it says, already previously listed. Active aggression, now the subject individual has overt actions and is actively assaulting me as a police officer. I can now use my intermediate weapons. It says baton strikes. This is taken straight from the order, by the way. Special weapons, impact munitions, those would be like beanbag type, yes. And then finally, obviously, aggravated act of aggression, as it reads verbatim, subject's behavior likely to cause death or serious physical injury of the officer or another, and we then, per policy, are allowed to use deadly force. The amount of times that we use deadly force is obviously right at about 1% or less. And I have all that, and we'll continue to move through. The defensive resistance, the physical restraint portion is what drives the use of force and why the numbers appear higher than I think they actually are. So in these two charts here, there's a so the department tracks two types of numbers. On the left is use of force incidents, which is completely different than total uses of force. And I will explain that. I actually have an example to try to put it in a better context. But first of all, reading from the slide, the use of force incident equals exactly that, an incident in which force is used. Uses of force is the total times force is applied. As I put in parentheses here, there can be multiple uses of force within the same incident, which is why when we look at these two charts, so let's just take, for the sake of argument, 2021, for instance. The number of use of force incidents was 295. The number of uses of force inside of those 295 incidents was 809. Okay, so I'll give you the example. So an officer tackles a citizen. Two other officers use force by pulling the arms of the citizen to the handcuffing position. Even though 3 officers used force by the department's definition, the occurrence is considered one incident. So that goes down as 1, but in the example I just used, there would be 3 counts of force under that 1 incident. So if one of these officers additionally used pepper spray because the level of resistance from the suspect escalated, the counts of force would increase to 4 while that incident would remain at 1. So hopefully that makes sense. And also understanding that numerous uses of force can also occur from 1 officer. So I don't want to just give you the appearance that, oh, we have 3 or 4 officers on scene, that's the only way that multiple uses of force can happen inside of that one incident. Numerous uses of force can also occur from 1 officer in 1 incident. For example, an officer attempting to handcuff subject begins to resist, officer attempts to grab the subject's wrist, continues in the resistance by pulling away from the officer multiple times. Each attempt by that officer to physically restrain that individual is counted as use of force. So if that subject then escalates the force for the sake of argument by assaulting the officer, he may resort to the use of pepper spray, taser, baton, things of that nature, which again is another use of force inside of that incident.
So in theory,
So my question is, how do they count the total use of force? And within that moment, because it is an emotional time.
It's a great question. So if we look at 2019, which, let me go ahead. Is everybody good with this slide? Because her question is going to lend itself to the next slide. If it works. Yeah, it is. No, go back. It looks like we skipped. So these are the same numbers that I just gave you. So I'm going to direct your attention to 2019. So your question is, well, how do we know? It's a great question, which is what I have my example for this. But before I get into that, so 567 times in 2019, that's how many uses of force. Now we look at 2021. Again, to you all or to me, just looking at the number without any context, I say, oh my God, we have 250 more, roughly uses of force. Here's why. So as we can read from this slide, and then I'll go into a further example, the use of body worn in-car cameras, which began in 2020, has led to an increase in overall use of force numbers. And that's not because of changing the officers' reporting. Nobody was ever trying to hide anything. But the use of body worn in-car cameras have allowed the department to accurately capture exactly what occurred during a single use of force incident. So I'll get into my example. So prior to 2020, so 2019 and any year before, and before the body worn in-car camera systems, if an officer was involved in use of force, it was reported in the same manner as I said as today. The heavy increase in uses of force, which again is different than the number of incidents, is because of the accuracy in which the cameras allow us to capture that actual number. So for example, an officer was involved in a use of force prior to 2020 without body cameras, and let's say that use of force incident lasted 2 minutes, which many of them do, 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, that they're in a struggle. So the officer would call during that struggle that he attempted to physically restrain an individual on 5 occasions. So a supervisor always responds to the scene of a use of force, and he would ask, hey, what happened? Tell me what happened. He's obviously going to interview the suspect. He's going to interview witnesses as well to try to get that best picture. But in a 2-minute struggle, a taser, pepper spray, baton, that's absolute. I remember how many times I deployed my taser. And even if I didn't, the department can't because we download that information. I'm going to remember how many times I deployed pepper spray. I may not over a 2-minute encounter remember how many times I'm trying, as the guy is struggling with me and trying to assault me, how many times I am grabbing at him. So as I continue with the example, so that's the only data that a supervisor at the time had to go by when conducting their administrative review of the use of force. So an officer's explanation of what happened, as well as I said, the suspect and witnesses. So today, a supervisor and every level on up, so sergeant, a lieutenant, a captain, colonel of the division, Bureau of Professional Standards, deputy chief, you get where I'm going. Everybody has eyes on this. So today, when the supervisor watched the officer's body camera footage, he can accurately capture with 100% certainty that the officer who thought he may have during that 2-minute struggle attempted on 5 occasions to grab an individual, that number may have actually in reality been 8. So unlike tasers or pepper spray, which I've already said, those things are absolute. You can remember, and again, it's all on body cam now. And as you'll see in slides to continue, the actual use of taser, we know this, taser, pepper spray, baton, it's all declined. The only thing that's gone up is physical restraint, which, to answer your question, is the absolute hardest for an officer who's involved in this long struggle to remember, man, I grabbed this guy's ankle one time, he rolled over on me. It's really hard to remember. So hopefully that puts that into context on why that number has increased what looks like so much when in reality of it. As I have at the very bottom of that, the number of uses of force per incident, they've gone up because of exactly what I've just explained, but it's not off the charts. We're still talking about in the 2s in each one of these incidents.
We're coming better.
Absolutely. It's just, it gives us a better, accurate, more accurate reporting. This thing doesn't seem to be working for me. You go back, I don't know if Yep. Thank you. So the chart here is 19, 20, 21. The light gray is 21. If you just look at one, all you need to look at is one part of this chart here, and that's the physical restraint, which has gone through the roof. Again, because that everything else, if you can hit the next slide, I think this is the more hardcore data. Everything else has come down. So firearm went up 9 to 12. I'll explain the parentheses here in a second. But baton was used 6 times in 19 and only twice over the past 2 years total. The use of canine has come down, obviously, from 19 to 21. You know, if the question would be posed of why did it go up, you know, from 6 to 11? Those are a lot of the canine. It's all about deployment. Is there a canine officer in the area? Does it meet the criteria? So again, those things are very, very fluid. There may be something that meets our criteria that we just have a canine 35 minutes away. By the time the canine gets there, there's, can't use that. The taser obviously has declined in each of the years. Pepper spray, same thing. Physical striking, you know, it's going to fluctuate a little bit across the board, but pretty consistent, although down from 13% to 8% over the last 3 years. But physical restraint, again, has gone from 334 to 632. Not because any officer has been doing anything wrong. The reporting has stayed the same. It's just the use of body-worn cameras has allowed us to see that is the massive increase that we see here. The other category, just so you are aware, is things like pressure points, joint locks. I think one, as I was talking to our professional standards to get a lot of these statistics in 2021, I think it was 19 were pressure points, 2 were joint locks, 1 was a leg sweep. The other category is going to diminish here in 2022 because our BPS folks have spoken with IA Pro, which is the database that all of our use of force data is collected from, and they have now added pressure points as one of these. So others should almost go away. Can you get the next slide, please? So this slide shows the police calls for service and self-initiated assignments. I put this on here to show the context of So Commissioner Ashworth, you said at the very end of this, the main takeaway. It is, you can see so the left chart is for a single officer directed, self-initiated. Over 500,000 calls per year is what our police respond to across the department. Over almost 200,000 times per year, there's an assist officer on scene. Again, just throwing those in there for context. If you can move to the next slide. Because the main thing that I want you to take away is written right here, that the St. Louis County Police rarely use force in the context of our overall interaction with the public. So as you can see, I have up here directed calls for service, the self-initiated, same thing as the last chart, but here in raw data, and the total calls for service. So we had over almost 530,000 in 2019 and 20. 2021, we dropped by 30,000 calls for service. However, look at the directed calls for service. The directed actually went up 17,000 from the previous 2 years. The reason I direct you to that number is nearly 72% of every use of force on our department is derived from an officer receiving a directed assignment and not from self-initiated. So we would expect that with 17 or 18,000 more calls, that our number of use of force incidents would actually increase as it has. And then over here, it shows on the use of force incidents per directed call for service, it's still less than 1% each year that our officers actually use force while on scene. The last two slides just show what type of, this one shows what type of service that we were giving. Obviously, at the very top is call for service, arrest attempts, those could go either way. Could be an officer's self-initiated arrest attempt or directed assignment from dispatch. CIT and domestic disturbances are also in there. Next slide is what reason for the use of force by incident. So resisting arrest overwhelmingly takes the cake the majority of the time, obviously non-compliant subjects, CIT combative subjects, and assault on officers. So again, I think in the context of all of the numbers and all of the data that I've just thrown at you, the most important piece of this is to understand that our officers actually do an outstanding job knowing how many interactions on a day-to-day basis or on a yearly basis they have with members of the public. They resort to using force on that minimal of a scale.
Thank you very much. I appreciate on behalf of all of us drive down into this for all these reasons, right? This is how we interact with citizenry there. So heard the message loud and clear. I had 4 things. About getting better at each
Say 0.
4. Getting better at gathering data, right? So much more objective, much less subjective to ask this question. Right? I don't remember whether I did it 3 times or 4 times, right? That's correct. I think that's extraordinary.
The body cameras take the guessing game.
And someone does the review of the body camera for us, is what we think we heard you say. There's an organization.
At every level. So sergeant, lieutenant, captain, colonel, DPS, deputy chief of police. So there's so many eyes being put on this.
It's awesome. So better. Say. Absolutely.
Are we reviewing it with the officer at any point?
Yes, absolutely. That would be at a lower supervisory sergeant, lieutenant level.
No, one quick. That was number 4, which was thanks. Transparency was the second, right? Now that we have the data, we're starting to share it. So it allows all of us to, including citizens, to take track of that. Third, just the first one, I was awestruck by over 500,000 calls a year, responses a year out of our officers. Right? All of you, that's remarkable. That's incredible. And with that, as you said, 1,000 have some use of less than 1,000 have the use of force. That's great. And that's just remarkable. So there's almost 300, we'll round a little bit, maybe closer to 400, 365, I think the number was. That seems like a large number until you put it in context of half of it.
That's right. And again, and I'm not saying that, I think one of the other major portions is, and I'm not saying any of the 4 of you think this way, but I think that The public has this thing when they hear use of force, it's automatically, oh, somebody's using a baton or a taser. That's not the case. It's such minimal times that we actually use those instruments. The majority of the time, it's because somebody is not using hands. And
Great message. And then Commissioner Schwanger took the last question, which is, so what are we doing with this, right? No, that was a great question, right? We have all this data. What do we do with it? That's the fundamental question. We said we're sharing with the officers or with the sergeants to continue to better our practices for our officer health and safety, but also for citizens.
yeah, and the great thing with the cameras as well as the last thing I'll say is that, again, just knowing this from a precinct level, even if an officer did his job over and above and did an excellent job, whether he's wrestling with a guy for 2 minutes or whatever, it also allows us on top of that to talk to the officer about better tactics that they may be able to use to avoid the situation the next time in the first place. Yeah, thank you. I'll see you all here in just a little bit for some policy. Thank you.
I don't know if this was counted in Brian's presentation, but he gave you that 500,000 contacts that we have. And those are the officers on the street, but we're still responsible for all the contacts that our security officers make with the thousands of people that they see every day and have contact with. And again, if you put those numbers in there, it'll probably be even less than what we're doing. And this is the kind of information, as you say, that we need to get out to the public, show them positive things that we're doing on this department, instead of, listening to all the social media stuff that's said about us, is to get this information out to them. That's what we want to do with some of this stuff. That's why he's an analyst. He went out and looked at the weather and decided, how the weather has an effect on stolen cars. And it's the truth. It does. It does. And that's going to go to Colonel Cox. He and Deputy Chief got together, had a 2-hour meeting yesterday about a task force that they're going to put together. And I think it's a very workable, doable task force. We're copying from what they're doing over in St. Charles. But that's what they're going to do with special forces that they're going to work on. Have a special force out there every month to deal with stolen cars and catalytic converters and things like that. So again, something positive we're trying to do to let the public know that we're concerned about what's going on out there.
Chance to meet some of the lieutenant staff. It's pretty remarkable.
And I know Janelle talked about us needing an overall crime strategy program. That's what we're doing. We're taking that information we're getting from our analysts, putting all that information together, giving that information to the different precincts that need to go there. Now that precinct captain is going to take that information and develop his own crime strategy. All the different precincts are going to have different crime strategies, different issues that they're dealing with, but they're getting it all from our analysis. And that's our overall crime strategy. We'll let Janelle. Saw Kim Miner sitting back there. And last week I attended, talking about pursuits. I attended the Pursuit for Persons. It's sponsored by the Family Association. They did an outstanding job there. I failed to mention that to her last week at the event, but they did an outstanding job. Family Association pretty much works like the Welfare Association. They raise money, put it together to help our police officers and their families when there's a time of need. Feeding the family when someone's in the hospital, giving them financial support when it's necessary. And she's done that for a number of years, and it just continues to get better. And that program that she put on last week was outstanding. Just saw it because I was sitting there, and she's one of our analysts also. That's just, thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
I think up next is Captain Kelly. We'll talk about the academy.
Good morning. Good to see you. I would like to just take a few minutes just to let you know what the mission of the academy is. A lot of people don't understand exactly what it is that we do there. Okay? The mission of the academy is basically to provide quality law enforcement services and training to the outlying areas so they can actually provide better services to their community. And we do that in two ways. providing recruit training and continuing education. If I could, the one thing you have to understand is that there's over 14,000 police officers in the state of Missouri. And the one thing that we actually stress to not only the recruits, but also to the police officers is that we're the first line of defense when it comes to ensuring protection of the constitutional rights of our community. And that is going all through training, not only basic recruit training, but also through continuing education. If I could throw some numbers out to you, last year in 2021, the Academy sponsored 92 continuing education classes. Of that, 7,373 police officers attended the Academy physical. Within that time frame, also 4,097 attended Virtual Academy and Police Legal Science. Again, 14,507 full-time police officers. We touched throughout the region over 11,000 police officers. We had 111 in-service and firearms classes conducted in 2021, and approximately 945 St. Louis County police officers and security officers attended that training. A lot of the training that we do, we try to stay on the cusp of whatever the trends are out there. And right now, it has to do with cultural diversity, and we're pushing that endeavor all throughout continuing education, as well as the basic training recruits. We have partnered with the Police Foundation, and we have a class sponsored by the 6-Letter Concepts Group, Human Terrain Mapping Behavior Recognition, and we're training our entire department on that. That class itself focuses on our goal of reinforcing community-oriented constitutional policing, throwing those principles towards looking at the behavioral outliers versus race and demographics upon any type of an encounter with the community. Questions?
The 6-layer concepts,
Yes, ma'am.
how many, is it a classroom training?
It is classroom training.
And it's a certain number of hours?
I believe we have a 3-day class and a 2-day class, and it also has scenario-based training with that.
So would that count for a significant portion of each of our officers' equal requirements?
That is correct. Just to touch on that, they give tests in that class, and you're required to pass that test based on what you've learned. And so far, we've had, I want to say 97%, but we've got others back and they were able to pass the test for what those instructors are looking for. And on another note, just based on virtual training for Virtual Academy and Police Legal Science, we provide the academy. We provide that post credit. So we are providing post credit to over 4,000 police officers within the region.
What percentage of our department has gone through 6 layers so far?
We're just now starting the second year. I have to say we're through half right now.
You usually do, you're that good. So I'll just shut up and let you ask the question. You're great at it.
A couple of things, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Thank you. It's neat to see, refreshing to see our leadership, not just within our own community, but also say that that's a sign of leadership for the department. That's great to see, as you would expect out of St. Louis and St. Louis County. What's connecting is the conversation you just shared back with the information we just saw and how our officers are responding to things like uses of force, which are taught. Right? So just how all of this fits together in a philosophy on how we are teaching our newer officers, our candidates, and our existing officers how to east if we go forward yet still ensure that we protect them. It's neat to see how it all does start. You said a little bit earlier, right? All fits together. It's nice to see how it all fits together.
The community is asking for better trained police officers, and I think with the staff that I have, especially the supervisors, we're actually on the cusp of the training trends, better training trends, and reaching out not only within the St. Louis area, but other areas within the region to bring in the training.
Have to refresh us. The post requires that there's a requirement for a certain number of hours for an existing officer per year. What is that? And then what do we on average run? From a standpoint, how are the training?
With recruit training is 600 hours base, but we teach 912. And with police officers, they have to have 24 hours within 3-year period.
Basically 50% more than.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Good morning, everyone. So for the staffing report, we have 60 vacancies currently, and that were authorized 973. We have 913 actual police officers. Class 204 started January 3rd. They have 19 county recruits in that class right now. And for the April class, which is a little unusual, I'm not sure the last time we've had an April class where we're going to be overlapping classes in the academy, but that is typically a smaller enrollment. We'll still have a late June class also that starts. That will likely be a bigger class. We have 3 recruits right now for the April class. Our goal is 20. And we recently hired 2 experienced officers, one from the city and one with a post license. So they'll be hitting the street here shortly. And they're already trained. With professional staff, we have 370 authorized and 23 vacancies. So we have 347 actual professional staff members. The professional staff CBA, we're meeting again on February 25th. We can talk about more of the details if you wish in closed session. And the PSD Academy, the Dispatcher Academy, class number 12 started January 31st with 7 dispatchers. They typically have a capacity of anywhere from 14. And Academy class number 13 for the dispatchers starts April 11th. And the vacancies with respect to professional staff are broken down as 1 records clerk supervisor, 4 record clerks, 1 report clerk, 2 dispatchers, and 6 security officers. The 2 dispatchers down is a little misleading because you have the graduates from the most recent dispatcher class that aren't ready to be on their own. And then, of course, we have the 7 that are in the academy right now. So they're not fully functional. Maybe it will take about 6 months for them once they get out of the academy to be on. And with respect to COVID, there was a time period last week where for about 3 or 4 days, we had 0 employees out with COVID. Right now, I think that number is 6. So those effects have gone down and diminished. The quarantine period is only 5 days. Most people get back and come back to work with the when they're symptom free after those 5 days of quarantine. And military separation, we still have 12 employees. We recently hired a reservist and a National Guardsman. We remind everyone that the department fully supports those people and their military obligations. And with respect to applications for December of last year, we had 23 police officer or police recruit applications. We currently have 11 in backgrounds right now. 3 were NBQ'd in December and 9 voluntarily withdrew. Those NBQs and voluntary withdrawals are not necessarily associated with the 23 applicants because that's just a monthly number. And then the total hires so far for the year, 4 commissioned and 11 non-commissioned. And just a quick update on some of the things we're doing with recruiting. The recruiters are out there at job fairs and so forth, all the traditional things, pushing on the military. They're going to be meeting with the chaplains at the chaplains have quarterly training. They're going to meet with the chaplains to discuss explain to them their roles and what maybe the chaplains can do in regard to recruiting. Obviously, that's a big network of people that have an audience, if you will, that can recruit for us. We're continuing to press on with our partnership with Hairstone and also so a few other universities that may be interested with that tuition enrollment partnership of like Lindenwood and Maryville do with the Academy. We're going to be producing some videos. It's been a little bit of a challenge with respect to recruiting videos with respect to staffing and funding, but we're going to get that across the finish line. We're also going to be increasing the referral fee from $400 for to employees that refer a candidate that successfully is hired, $400 for inexperienced employees, and $600 for experience. That's going to go up to $800 and $1,000 for the referral. And as I've always said, we're all recruiters, and if that's an incentive that helps out a little bit more, then that'd be great. With respect to retention, we've automated the exit interviews now, so we'll be able to hold that data in a little bit more of a scientific or quantitative fashion. And we're also at the very beginning stages of a mentor program. I think that's an idea that's taking off nationwide. The idea is to train an officer. It'll take about 32 hours of training to do it right. And that's broken down into a couple different areas. And then that officer would likely have, we'll have to figure out the numbers because not everybody's going to qualify as being a mentor, be selected to be a mentor, that person would likely have, that officer or professional staff employee would likely have 2 mentees. That kind of a ratio to be able to encourage and support that person. The idea being from day one or even prior to day one in the academy, and then that person would follow their mentee through their entire career. So that's just one retention idea that we have that we're working on. Again, it's going to take some time. It's going to take some training to do it right. The wellness unit is leading that charge, and we also talked about it last week at the SLAPCA meeting, and other departments are doing the same thing. So, which is a good thing because we can't impose upon the municipal recruits at the academy. We can't force the municipal departments to have a mentor for each of their recruits, but they all seem to be on board with that concept, so everybody can be included in the academy. That's all I have.
Once our field trainers, once our new recruits finish with the field training, does their assigned field, is it FTI?
Correct.
FTI. Does the FTI check in with the recruit at any period once the training ends?
I think informally, yes. There's no formal program for that. I mean, field training 16 weeks long. And I think it also depends on the field trainer. Everybody will tell you out here, there's some FTIs that are, very tough and are challenging their trainee. Others, they have more of a friendly relationship, if you will. So it just depends on the personal relationship too. And we've talked about the FTI role too. We think it's very important to separate the mentor from the FTI because they really have 2 different roles.
On the mentor program, I have a question. When is the mentor assigned? Is that when they're at the academy or upon graduation?
Well, ideally, no, prior to that. Ideally, even before they start, they can start that relationship because and I know you've all remembered this. Sometimes we lose a recruit the first week. Why is that? I don't know. Maybe there's a lot of reasons. Maybe they didn't realize what they were getting into. They had a change of heart, whatever it is. If we have that mentor, it's not going to be a panacea, but it'll be some kind of support that, hey, you can't be tough. Yeah, somebody to bounce things off of. So ideally, I don't think we have the staffing for it, but LAPD, they assign somebody from day one of the application that follows the person all the way through. We just don't have that kind of staffing to give that kind of attention, but we tend to do more of a relay system where the recruiters get them in the door, then they build a relationship with the background investigator, then they go to the academy and build relationships with the instructors and the staff there and so on. So the idea is
all that I just said to supplement with a more formal mentor.
And the mentor are they volunteers or are they mandated to?
No, definitely volunteers. In fact, part of the training, the 32 hours, the first set has to be the peer support team training that we give 16 hours for. I think we have 8 peer support team members right now. They need that first to understand how to deal with people. They're going to, hopefully none of their mentees are going to have critical incidents, but they know the psychology and they have the training. And then the other 16 hours are more the traditional mentor training, if you will. So, and they would be volunteers. It would be similar to the peer support team members. If it's just a phone call or so forth, it's a volunteer thing. They won't be compensated for that. If it's a 3 or 4 hour call out because of a critical incident, they of course would be compensated. If they're going to go play golf with their mentee, they're not going to get paid 5 hours or however long it takes.
So I've got a question. Is there any connection with technical schools training and our, I'm trying to say, those students who go through these training techniques? Where did they end up?
Are you referring to like a Rankin or Rankin Tech or something like that? Or
North County, South County Tech.
oh yes, we have some cadets from those schools and they're SROs at those schools that have a relationship with the kids and with the students. And there's a criminal justice curriculum. So that has been, we have a few people right now that are commissioned officers that went to kind of Tech. So if that answers your question, that is a feeder source.
Directly from the tech school.
Well, there might be a lapse where they go work somewhere else, or they become cadets. We have some of them. Some of them might go to dispatch or anywhere else in the professional staff. If they're getting out, they're 18, they can't be an officer until they're 21. Try to hang on to them during the time. And that's the good thing about the cadet program is we don't lose them. If they're an explorer, they normally stop at about age 18 and they go on to college and so forth. If they're in town here, if we get them to be cadets, then we can observe them, they can observe what it's like working for them. So we have 2 cadets in the process right now who want to move on to the academy. So.
You don't necessarily have any influence on the training that they're getting at the technical schools.
I'm not certain of that. I can find out for you. I'd have to talk to the SROs as to how much they are a liaison and confer with the staff there. I'm not sure, but I can find that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner, I think that's all we have, the chief's report.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, everybody. Our next topic is the approval of minutes from our meetings in January, from January 11th, January 12th, January 20th.
That goes. Move that those minutes.
I'll second that.
Further conversation on the minutes? All in favor? Any opposed? Any letters and or communications?
Oh, sorry.
And the old business. All right. For new business, we have 23 contracts. We were trying to get through them quickly, so if they're not, we're trying to get through them quickly. All our professional service agreements, 21 of the 23 are for the St. Louis County Municipal Police Academy. There are our acronym CMPA as we read. All right, with you all, we'll do them in today. Simply comfortable. Very good. The first 2 are contracts with the city of St. John and the other is with the Right Solutions. They're not related to the CMPA. First, the professional service agreement, as I said, with the city of St. John. It is it is for coordinated communication and computer assisted relay entry acronym CARE, between the City of St. John and the St. Louis County. Term of this agreement expires December 31, 2025, and in 2022, the annual charge is $52,025.38. The next is a professional service agreement with the Right Solution, Inc. It is for designated help for peer support mentors. Each session will provide training for up to 30 students and will be 2 days long. The contract is for $16,000 over the course that's taught throughout 2022. The rest of the professional service agreements all deal with the CMPA. The first is with Stephen Gerard Mullering Jr. It's a new contract for combatant tactics and self-defense for law enforcement for the March 16, 17, 20 at a cost not to exceed $4,800. The next is a professional service agreement also with Stephen Gerard Mullering for combatant tactics and self-defense for law enforcement for the April 12th, 13th, 2022, and it will also not to exceed $4,800. The next is a professional service agreement with IXII. All of that, but IXII Group is for the CMP as we talked. It is for communication training officer for April 6th to the 8th, 2022 at a cost not to exceed $6,000. Next is professional service agreement with Right Solutions, Inc. for interpersonal perspectives and distress management on October 30th, June 2nd, August 10th, and October 26th, 2022 for the cost not to exceed $2,000. The next one is with Right Solutions, Inc. Interpersonal perspectives and stress management on October 30th, 2022, not to exceed $1,000, and one with Training Force USA LLC for budgeting for law enforcement professionals on April 22nd, 2022, at a cost not to exceed $4,100. We'll pause there for approval of those contracts.
Would that be approved these contracts?
Second. Any further conversation? I do have a question here. The two for Right Solutions, it looks like the same program, and yet one was carved out. Was it an ad since it's on a different date? Does anyone know? 4 of them went together, and this one's carved out for a specific date. Does anyone know why that's not part of the original contract?
It's not a different date for the same program, is it?
It is a different date, but the first one had 4 dates: March, June, August, and October, and this is a second one in October. Sure, if you would hold on.
Probably just with him. Well, it probably just had to do with scheduling. I'm just guessing that the way it came in was the last class was probably added after the other contract was already written.
Thank you. We'll go ahead. Sometime we have a motion to approve. If we approve them, we'll approve it. But would appreciate it. Amy's point is that was an add-on, an additional class added, or what? Right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving those 8 contracts? Aye. Any opposed? Very good. The next is with Training Force USA LLC, Courtroom Karate. Approach to your next trial with confidence, scheduled for April 11th, 2022, at a cost not to exceed $38.50. Different clothes, is that? I'm training you. Training Force USA, the escalation tactics, April 2022, at a cost not to exceed $38.50. Training Force USA, serving with honor in the 21st century, on April 19th, 2022, at a cost not to exceed $38.50. Patrick E. Marine, for first line supervision for April 18th to the 22nd, 2022, at a cost not to exceed $1,600. Patrick E. Marine for first line supervision on August 8th through the 12th, 2022, at a cost not to exceed $1,600. Randy Means and Associates, advanced supervision and leadership on March 21st and 22nd, at a cost not to exceed $5,000. Randy Means and Associates, constitutional law review and update for April 6th and 7th, 2022, at a cost not to exceed $5,000. Randy Means and Associates, creating and maintaining the well-disciplined organization for April 4th and 5th, 2022, at a cost not to exceed $5,000. And Randy Means and Associates for strategic planning on March 23rd, 24th, 2022 at a cost not to exceed $5,000. Motion for approval, I believe that was 9 contracts on that.
I move that we have.
Thank you. Any further discussion? For approval?
Aye.
Any opposed? Last, set the general dynamics ordinance and tactical systems, simulation operations, simulation. Simulation scenario instructor and safety certification course for March 8th through 10th, 2022 at a cost not to exceed $77.80. Moser Training Solutions Field Training Officer from May 24th through the 27th, 2022 at a cost not to exceed $461. Moser Training Solutions Field Training Officer for August 22nd through the 25th, 2022, also at a cost of $84.61, not to exceed that cost. Third one from Moser Field Training Officer for number 14th through 17th, 2022. Also at a cost not to exceed $48.61. Optimum Forensic Solutions, Advanced Photography and Death Investigation on April 26, 2022 at a cost not to exceed $2,400. And lastly, from Optimum Forensic Solutions, Blood Impact and Blood Stain Recognition on April 25th, 2022 at a cost not to exceed $2,400. Second. Thank you. Thank you. Discussion on those? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. It's interesting as I read these now in context of the earlier conversations we have, just the significant investment we make in our officers, just to connect with some of the conversations we were having earlier. So, staff, it's nice to see that happen. I have a question, if you don't mind, out of character. What is simunition?
Take that. So it's a round that fires out of your normal duty pistol and shoots in its live paint. So you get marking round and you get paint compliance at the same time. So it's not like doing a training scenario where you clear a room and you're like, bang, bang, you're dead. You actually pay a price for making a wrong move. It's simunition. You get hit by simunition and it hurts.
Paintballing.
On steroids. So yes, it's not just air driven like that. You actually have a primer that fires around, fires through your normal duty pistol. And like I said, it hurts and it marks at the same time. So it's an enhanced level of training that the academy uses for advanced type classes.
Much more of a real life simulation. Very good.
So if your body messes up, you get hurt.
Absolutely. And that happens all the time.
And
Solve that problem.
I'm with her. Why were you pointing at the gentleman? Pointing to the gentleman at your left.
So when I was the basic training supervisor at the academy, I took probably more pleasure than I should have in some training scenarios with her.
Ouch.
Very good. When they do that training, they're all so fitted with helmet, eye guard, so nothing.
Wear extra layers of clothing.
Thank you for ensuring the safety is there too. Say that tongue in cheek. Right. Anything else on contracts? Madam Chairman, I think you're back up.
Sir. Two orders to review. First one, new General Order 22-123, which is speed limit enforcement methods. CLIA requires that a report of all selective enforcement activity is compiled annually. Currently, the way that our department works, there's no way to get uniform selective enforcement data from all precincts due to varying collection methods and lack thereof for each precinct. So the attached draft that you all have in front of you establishes a method to collect this information and creates forms that can be used department-wide to ensure consistency among that data collection, which will greatly assist in maintaining our CLIA. We've all had a chance to look at this. Does anybody have any questions regarding speed limit enforcement?
Very technical.
LiDAR, radar, There is a laser.
Great, we have a motion to approve.
Move that we approve this general order.
Second. All in favor of approving general order 21-123, please vote aye. Backwards. Okay. Thank you. What is it? Corrected? 22-123. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? You, sir. You, sir.
Right, then our last one is the revised general order 22045, which is selection process. This policy was updated to include the new links to the careers section on the department website, police academy, on the county's website. Other updates to this policy include more details of the hiring process, expiration timeframes of applications, eligibility of reapplication, as well as the inclusion of not best qualified. Also, due to the order, descriptions of the essential functions of each of the department's positions. Each position will be attached to the order and included in power units. Hopefully you've all had a chance to review this. Is there any questions regarding selection process?
I'll try to keep it brief. With the often is the physical test. That's just a one-time test, or is it given over the course?
So it's given, Mr. Becker, if I answer this wrong, it's given to every policeman that would apply. So anybody trying to become a recruit at the academy, it is given. If they fail that, I believe that score is kept for 5 years. How many times can they take it after that?
They can take it again. We normally encourage them to get in shape and then come back, not, the next day or, maybe 2 to 4 weeks, depending on our timeline for recruiting and trying to get people in. And then experienced officers that are height, weight compliant.
If they're not high point compliant,
Take the test.
thank you. That answers the question.
And isn't it that they take the test and it's the end of the, I was reading, I saw if they don't meet the height weight, they have to take the test and meet the end of the.
So they have to meet the exit standard from the police academy. That's correct. Which
Which is a
obviously there's an entry. That there's a midterm. Actually, the final would be more rigorous, or a few more push-ups or sit-ups, less time on the mile and a half. Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. So we need to approve general order 22-045 selection process.
Move that we approve this general
Further discussion on general order 22-045 selection process. Favor? Vote. Okay, thank you. Any public forum, any comments, anything to address?
I have one email for you. It says, Dear County Police Commissioners, Happy New Year to all commissioners and staff members in the St. Louis County Police Department. I look forward to a safe and healthy 2022. My following comments are surrounding the closed portion and proposed closed portion of the Commissioners' meeting. When will the Board of Police Commissioners begin to be transparent and release all votes, decisions, and directives of the board members while in closed session and behind closed doors, away from the public view and consumption? We, the members of the public, demand accountability, responsibility, and full disclosure of all votes and decisions of the Board of Police Commissioners, without running interference and keeping secrets from the citizens of St. Louis County. After a vote of the Police Commission in closed session, the matter becomes a public vote within 72 hours per Chapter 610 of the revised state statutes of Missouri. There was a closed session of 1/11/22 and a proposed closed session to be held 1/12/22. Please disclose and post the votes and actions of the County Board of Police Commissioners. Thank you, Arnie C. Dino.
All right, anything else?
That was all.
We're gonna do that at the end. It's the way the agenda laid out is when we come back from. Can't get the wrong one, forgive me. Yes, we are gonna talk. Thank you. So tee this up a little bit. The board has been talking about what our priorities will be. Leadership, what our priorities are, the police board. Have created an initial draft, probably not had any conversation on this, so it's based on conversations, absorbing things over the course of the last several months. Because they would take these like their conversational pieces, what we'll focus on over the next several years. Don't recall whether these were posted or not, but allow me a moment to read on behalf of the board. The first one says, working with the chief, enable our shared future with specific focus on culture, leader and employee development, inclusion and diversity, the engagement, recruiting and retention, enhanced community. Our second says, continue to expand integrated crime prevention, criminal justice, and public safety across the entire St. Louis community. Third is acquire the funding and investment needed to ensure the St. Louis County Police Department remains a leading, respected first-class organization. Since it says financial capital and human investment. Fourth is engage and influence key stakeholders in shared public safety. Fifth is lead and manage the chief and the department in a role as a civilian oversight. And sixth is develop ourselves into a strategic leadership team, utilizing measures of strategic progress toward our even better future. Now that is a complete first draft. It has not been wordsmithed. Hope you catch the concepts that are in there, which is work with the chief on priorities within the department, work across the community, ensure we have the appropriate funding and investments, engage our community stakeholders, work with the chief specifically to manage the organization where needed, and develop ourselves. I mean, that's a summary of where we are. So with that, we'll open it up for conversation.
You discussed those issues with me last week about the objectives of the board. And when you appointed me as chief, I remember telling you that, that I wouldn't want to be able to make any changes or do anything on this department without the support of the board. Those objectives that you just read off is what I'm looking for. It's what I appreciate. It's what I appreciate you guys being a part of what's happening with this department, letting me know what direction I need to go. I'll convey that to my command staff. Try to do things. So I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
I really like these bullet points. There's something in the first item that says work with the chief on leader and employee development, which I think is very important. I would question whether that deserves its own item, and particularly with respect to a long-term strategic development of current and future leaders of the department, making sure that we are doing what we need to do now so that 3, 5, 10, 20 years from now, we have leaders with the experience, both practical experience and educational experience. And I know that's not our tactical responsibility as the board, but I think it's important enough that I'd like us to be involved in those conversations.
I'd like to see it highlighted a little differently than just development, more like succession planning in the future, or you're just calling it out as a point, or you don't think it should be in here at all because it should be part of what we should be doing.
Well, I think it needs to be written.
Okay.
I would suggest it deserves its own
Second.
line item, unless we all sit here today and say, yes, we agree with else thought, and it's just saying leader and employee development is enough, that we all understand what that means. But I see that going in a lot of my view is adding long-term and strategic on-the-job training as well as the education. Specific training programs. Not that we're deciding what everybody does, but making sure that that's something that we're.
I think that's a good point. But the only thing I would say is that everything in that first bullet point is loaded. Everything in that first bullet point essentially could be its own bullet point. Because the D&I part is important, the community engagement part, certainly the recruitment and retention part, each of those to be, we got we'll wordsmith it as our chairman said, but I agree. I think all of it's fully loaded in that first bullet point.
It's a heavy.
Yeah, I was just maybe putting together culture, community engagement, goals. I agree. Quite a bit. Culture, those sort of have this connection. Really tension. Probably. Well, the second to the last underwhelmed by the. I don't feel comfortable. Maybe it's just words. Figure out some better way to state that same. That's.
Do you think that it's kind of saying the same things?
Yeah, it may be just to take it out. Because the other points, well, it's a little bit different because it's really talking about us as a commission, our responsibility. Just I think wording size.
Drafted it was create the difference between being more of a strategic looking at the future and our role in the county charter that our job is to meet demands, right? So separating those two so they don't get lost. They're two different, even though they're significantly integrated there. Decide what we're going to do with it.
It makes a lot of sense. And
I mean, I don't mean that that's not.
That language.
I mean, not bad, just different.
I don't think that's good. I got to get through it. Not at all. Okay, so we got a little bit of work to do on the first one, a bit of work to do on the fifth one. By the way, this doesn't just have to be us, if you all have experience in we want to get it right. And that doesn't mean it's the right thing that's locked in stone forever. I'll edit it next month would be. Okay.
I would suggest say that I'm not there. Document. Stay the same.
I feel comfortable having this list. And then when we review ourselves, say, we did X, priority one, did X, Y, and Z.
Track.
Utilizing measures. By the way, we'll reciprocate with the chief. Had that conversation with over about what he needs from us, us to set direction. The reciprocation would be given the paper around. So I say, you know, if you're not doing this, or I need more of this, or whatever. So how do we want to get after the first and the fifth bullet? Once you need, you mind running some language, just language on the fifth bullet?
Sure.
You mind taking the first one? Fine. To address, or is it?
I think we're all on the same page.
You back? Thoughts from you all? Thank you. Work on it. Appreciate that. The last topic was reopening the meetings to the public. There's been a couple conversations had with the public, saying, when are you all going to open these up so we can physically come back in, right? So there are open through virtual, like physically come back in. My suggestion would be, let's understand what would cause us to make a decision, to allow people to come back or not, as opposed to making that decision today, right? What's our criteria? Whose criteria we would use, such as there's no, or there's a less than X percent, or, whatever number we want to put around about an infection or a flu out there. Mask mandates have been, I'm throwing these out as ideas. It seems like perhaps drafting the criteria when we make it. That criteria. That sounds like a logical next step. Go after getting that criteria. Let's go for it. Love it. What would be some of the criteria we might use?
I would suggest not.
Oh, we can get into a bigger thing, because this one's pretty fast on social distancing, right? So space availability.
In terms of what you're saying. Also, larger venue options.
So that would be in the house, but make sure the registration, there's.
Make sure that we determine first. There.
Super Bowl of board meetings.
Right. Some of others.
Also might be space availability, medical information. First.
They had to, in the past, they still had to. When I was talking about registration. Have to previously state.
If they wish to speak, they didn't have to register before. They had to come and sign up prior to the meeting.
Okay.
Sydney, I take your idea and put it down as something along the lines of, and the protocols for within meeting activity is done, such as registration, such as how long they can talk and how they can. Council.
No, we've never had a very large number of public attendance at the meetings. It's never really been like that, or it was necessary that it would one or two at the most. The majority of the people in attendance at the meetings are always employees. And that comes when we do awards and promotions and everybody brings their friends, families.
But there were a couple of times, once or twice. So, I mean. Basically.
I know that during the chief's process,
Yeah.
there was a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we have really cheated the protocols on how we work within the meeting. Just one is the space available, and two is probably more. Next steps then. Check space availability. That's very good. Thank you. All right. Conversation. Board of Commissioners may vote to go into closed advice and review lawsuits following section 610.01021 RSMO and section 4.0201 SLCRO. Discussions of employee and personnel matters, section 6 RSMO, section 4.02 SLCRO. Update on union negotiations, section 69 RSMO and section 4.0209 SLCRO. Discussions of rest of proposal, sections 12 and section 1.112. Have a motion to move to closed session.
Moving sessions.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Ashworth,
Yes.
Commissioner Banks,
Yes.
Hassler, yes, and Commissioner Schwer.
Closed session. Thank you all. We're returning from our closed session. May we have a motion to return to open session?
I move that we return to open session.
Second. All in favor?
Roll call vote.
Oh, roll call vote. You're right. Thank you. Roll call vote.
Commissioner Ashworth,
Yes.
Commissioner Banks.
Yeah.
Commissioner Schwer,
Yes.
Sure. Commissioner Hassler. All right, so returning to open session. We had one other item, which was the appeals hearings, and we did not discuss that. Subsequent. Anything else? It's ready to go.
I'll second that motion.
Maybe can you do a roll call vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Ashworth,
Yes.
Commissioner Banks.
Yes.
Commissioner Schwer.
Yes.
You're adjourned. Man,